This morning, I want to start with a short presentation, and then we have two presenters with us here today. And so really, I guess, where we're going to go now that we've had our initial presentation, good morning, is what are the challenges facing the county, both on the expenditure and revenue side in the long term, and how are we going to deal with them? And these are the kind of questions that I think we have to address. And I'll put this on the, will our revenues, Naib, there's a seat right up here in the front. Will our growth rate in our revenues keep pace with our needs? And then that really is the question, what are our needs that we have to deal with going forward? Will our class size in our school, will we be able to maintain our current quality in our schools and our current class size? Can we maintain our current ratio of police officers to population and our current low crime rates? Can we afford to maintain our infrastructure? And can we afford the cost of pensions and health care for our employees and I should have said, and retirees? Those are really I think the issues that are facing us as we try to figure out what our spending affordability should be. And today we're going to focus really on the first question. What is the current development potential in the county? Where it's going on, I think the question we have to deal with is, will our revenues be growing and at what rate will they continue to grow? And how do we project that? How do we feel about that? What does our general plan say about where the growth is going to take and what kind of growth is going to be? And we all know that Fort Meade is a major driver of our economy, so we have a presentation about that. So we have two people here with us today, and just to refresh your memory, this is these are the two pie charts from last week. The one on the left is our revenues, where our revenues come from, the property tax and income tax making up the vast majority of our revenues. And you can see that education and public safety make up 3/4 of our general fund. So those are the two big concerns we have. And so to help us with these presentations today, Jeff Brownell, who's I guess the Director of Research of the Department of Planning and Zoning. Is that your formal title?
Well, technically it's the chief.
The chief, okay.
Whatever that means.
And you've just completed work on the general plan, which has kind of determined what kind of growth and where it's going to be over the next so many years. And then Kent Menser, what is the formal title of your office?
We've changed that around a couple of times. Now the bracket's done, we're called the Mission Growth Initiative.
The Mission Growth Initiative at Fort Meade.
Yes.
Okay, so Jeff, I'm going to let you come up here, and I'll let you run this baby.
Okay, as Ray mentioned, I'm going to talk about the general plan. Howard County just adopted the general plan. It's called Plan Howard 2030 earlier in 2013, February of 2013. Now, the general plan is a 10-year plan. So about every 10 years, Howard County has adopted a new general plan, which is intended to be kind of the guiding plan for the county moving forward. And it includes things about land use growth and other things as well. The last general plan was in 2001. So this general plan was actually about 12 years, not quite 10 years. And it was a lot of time was spent on it, a lot of public participation, a lot of community involvements. There was a general plan task force. It goes through the planning board, and then the county council adopts the plan. And all the other kind of plans are really intended to be based on the general plan. So the general plan is kind of an umbrella plan. And plans like the Parks and Rec master plan tends to be based off the general plan. The police department, for example, may look at the growth projections in the general plan and plan their future police needs. Same with fire, and public works, for example, has a water sewer master plan. They update every 3 years. So the water sewer master plan would also look at the growth projections in the general plan. And I'll be focusing on those growth projections today. The overall kind of view of the general plan, or the theme, is sustainability, economic sustainability, community sustainability, and environmental sustainability. All three of those need to be sustained if we're going to have a positive future moving forward. The plan, by the way, is it's under planhoward.org, and here's a hard copy of it. It's not a very, it's a pretty concise plan, but if you want to look at it, it's planhoward.org, and this is briefly going to go through the chapters. There's introduction, which talks about sustainability, quality of life, and public participation. There's a chapter on the environment, environmental protection and resource conservation. There's a chapter on the economy, and that's what I'm going to focus on today is primarily growth in the county, since the purview of this committee is to look at the the potential revenue growth for the budget. The economy talks about economic development, growth, and transportation. And then there's a section on community, looking at infrastructure and services, housing, and community design. And then there's a section called action, because the plan is not worth anything if you don't take action, right? So there's a section on implementation and stewardship. We also, in the implementation part, we have DPZ is required to do monitoring. So every 2 years or 5 years, we need to produce a general plan monitoring report to basically monitor how the action items and the policies within the plan have been implemented over the last several years. So to kind of focus on economic issues, one of the emphases whatever it is, plural, actually the plan is to revitalize aging commercial corridors. Primarily corridors in Howard County include the Route 1 corridor, and to a lesser extent the Route 40 corridor. Yeah, kind of facing this way.
Yeah, you should.
So.
They told us that for the best video, you should be closer to the screens.
Okay, so I'll do that. So you can see the screen in the background.
Yes.
So the aging corridors, Route 1 corridor and the Route 40 corridor to a lesser extent. There's some discussion about the Snowden-Dobbin corridor, even though those aren't really aging corridors, those are relatively new. There is some development potential within that area. Particularly, there's the old GE plant in the Gateway area has potential for future growth. So there's some beginning discussions of that as a corridor to look at as well. This is the Route 1 corridor. We consider the Route 1 corridor basically everything east of 95. So this whole corridor east of 95 to the border is what we consider the Route 1 corridor. This actually began to be looked at the last general plan in 2001. There is a Route 1 plan that came out of that general plan, and we rezoned a lot of the Route 1 corridor. Primarily two new zones, TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, which is by the MARC station, so there's one down here in North Laurel, and there's a development with 1,000 units that's starting to be looked at or planned for. Annapolis Junction in 32 here, also a transit-oriented development next to the MARC station. There's a TOD up here in Oxford Square that's under development, and I'll have some of the numbers of units in future slides for those. Then there's also this zone called CAC, Community Activity Center, which is closer to Route 1 itself in different areas, and that's primarily intended to redevelop some of the aging, underutilized pieces of land, and to make it mixed use, so it would include commercial as well as residential growth. After the 2001 general plan and after the rezoning that followed that, the added capacity of about 8,000 or 9,000 units was added to the county, mostly high-density residential in this corridor. So that's a major focus of future growth in the county. Here's some pictures. This is an example of what Route 1 looks like today. And this is kind of how it's envisioned. Sidewalks for pedestrian access, better landscaping. Here's the median along Route 1, and the thinking is to add some landscaping. And here's a part of the corridor. You can see the power poles here, and no sidewalks. So the thinking is to add sidewalks and allow cars to park there, increase the economic activity. Now this is a huge endeavor. It's a 30-year plan. It was always envisioned to be a 30-year plan. It's very difficult to redevelop in general, and redevelop corridors in particular. You have to do a lot of parcel assemblage. You have to have people willing to redevelop. So it's always been envisioned as a long-term goal for the the county to do this. And there's starting to be some activity, which we'll talk about coming up shortly. The other type of concept for future growth is this higher densities and mixed use. The county's traditionally built a lot of single-family detached over time, to a lesser extent, townhouses and apartments. And the future is going to be the opposite of that. There's not much land left for single-family detached. So what's going to be the future, which again you'll see in the numbers, is mostly townhouses and apartments, to a lesser extent single-family detached. And in that vein, the concept is higher densities and more mixed use. And
If
so-
anybody has questions as he goes along, feel free to interrupt.
Yes, right. So an example of that is the downtown Columbia. It's a 30-year plan. The downtown plan was adopted about 3 years ago, or almost 4 years ago. And that's actually a very exciting plan. This is what it looks like today, and this is kind of the vision of it. When people talk about downtown Columbia, you always hear this concept that it's really not much of a downtown. You go down there, there's not much activity. There's activity if you have Merriweather concert, but in general, you don't see many people walking around the lakefront in all hours of the day. So the concept is to bring more development to downtown Columbia. And this is the program for the 30 years. It's 5,500 housing units, all apartments or condos, rental or condo units, 1.25 million square feet of retail, 4.3 million square feet of office, and a hotel conference center. So that's what the plan states. And if you've been down there, you've probably seen some activity. And I stole this slide from Mark Thompson, who's the downtown czar, we call him, works in the county executive's office. And he and I gave a presentation to the police commanders last week. They were interested in looking at future growth because they're coming up with their plan. And I don't know if you have time, but he'd be good, because he can give you a lot of details of how the plan's going. And this slide is a great summary. This is actually what's happening now. So you've probably seen, if you've been to the mall lately, this thing here. This is called the Metropolitan, and it's 300 units, 380 units, and 13,000 square feet of retail underneath the residential apartments. So this is under construction now. Phase 2 is going to be here, and that's an additional 437 housing units and 62,000 square feet of retail. So that's actually, we're starting to see some action down there. Some other things that have been happening is they're redoing the mall, the internal part of the mall. They took out land, it wasn't Land's End, it was LLB, and they're making it kind of like an outdoor type mall, and you're going to be able to walk all the way from this point to this side of the mall. So that's under construction, expected to be open in the summer. For right here, some of these older commercial office buildings need to be redone. And apparently this building didn't have a very good vacancy rate. The lobby, if you go into the lobby, it looks like it's not very attractive. So this group is redoing it. I guess this is First Potomac River Trust. They're redoing the interior. And Mark has some pictures, and they look really nice. So the concept is these guys have faith that downtown Columbia is going to be something good, so they're starting to redo some of the older buildings. This here is a 160-unit apartment building that's going to be under construction. It was owned by a company called WCI, which went bankrupt, has a new owner, and so now they're going to move forward with it. Other things at the lakefront includes Clyde's Restaurant was redone. There's another restaurant going in, and what's really exciting for the county is they're redoing the old Rouse headquarters and putting in a Whole Foods. So that's under construction too. And then a plan just came in, or a pre-submission meeting for the plan came in this area, and that's going to be a very big part of downtown, and it's 490 units and 750,000 square feet of office space. So that also is starting to develop. And then Symphony Woods is also starting to think about how they're going to improve that. So this is conceptual. The concept is, here's the mall, and where you're going to get the density, you're going to build in the parking lot around the mall, primarily, and put structured parking there. The parking's going away, obviously, the surface parking, so you put structured parking, build around the mall. create high density, and that's where all the 5,500 units and the 4.3 million square feet. Yes.
Jeff, are there any plans for newer schools there or expansion of schools?
Part of the general plan, the downtown Columbia plan, is there's required that we do a school study to look at the housing here and to look at, see if there's a need for a school. So we're just doing that now.
There's a
Yeah.
vacant school right across the street from the Wild Lake Village Center that has been vacant for a good number of years, and so that's a potential school site. Would have to be rebuilt. I think, Ken, isn't that the?
Yeah, Function Ridge Center is a potential new elementary site. The other school is Wild Lake Middle School. We're proposing a replacement middle school, which would give it more seats. And it's
That's the
also-
one behind the tennis courts.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's actually, maybe, when I have my discussion later, but so that, Jeff's and the county's doing a real good job of putting the framework in place for the commercial development, but, and so the new school, new elementary school, new middle school is consistent with that, but the funding mechanism is always the question.
Right.
Yeah. Now that we know we have the need, where do you get the money from?
And I guess the question that you also deal with in this high-end kind of development, how many school children are really going to be generated from these downtown apartments?
Exactly. And that's part of the reason we're doing a study now to come up with estimates of what it could be. And then we're required, after 10% of the development, to actually look at what the yields are. And then if there's a need for a new school, the developer is required to provide either a school site or some kind of way to mitigate the issue.
You
So
need the
to
space
speak.
for the school.
Space, exactly, so.
I'm sure that you're gonna put the schools first, right? You don't want to do the rezoning or zoning of.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lively debate between the developer and us
Yeah.
and what the
Question over here.
Right.
the generation rates are.
Yes.
Do you don't lean into growth then? I mean, in terms of schools, like you don't predict what it's gonna be and then you observe it first, or do you start?
Well, no, we predict, we work very closely with the school system, and based on all the future growth, we estimate what the school needs are gonna be. For this particular plan, the way it was written, it required a report that we're due initially, which tries to predict what the needs are based on the student yields. And as Ken was saying, it's very contentious what yields you use. But then the report also requires, the plan also requires after 10% to kind of relook at it, just to validate what's going on. It's basically almost an extra step, really. It's taking, after 10% of these there, it's saying, okay, what are these apartments and condos actually yielding in terms of students?
Let me ask the question a little differently. So, I mean, obviously on one side of the spectrum you have, we built it and it turns out it's all retirees and there's no school,
Right.
schools underutilized. On the other side, you have wildly overcrowded schools and you're behind and you gotta build.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you try, I mean, I think you just did, but can you
Right.
talk a little bit about how you balance that?
Well, we're not going to build a school now because there's no kids there.
Yeah.
So that's why the point is to monitor it and see what happens.
Okay.
And you kind of plan for that as best you can. There is an APFO in the county which gets into that whole.
Can you talk a little bit about that, because not everybody is.
Yeah, the APFO is called, it's the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. And what that is, there's two parts to it. One part, basically, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. I'll try to go through this.
Okay, why don't you?
Yeah, so we'll go into that in a minute. The point of this is that of all the future housing in the county, downtown Columbia and the Route 1 corridor is about 44% of it. So that's just something that kind of puts things in perspective. So now let's look at county-wide numbers and look at immediate growth and long-term growth projections. This is a history of building permits in the county. And you can see, this is a good segue to APFO. In the 80s, we had a lot of construction, 4,000 units per year. That's when Columbia was going very strong. The infrastructure was having a hard time keeping up, schools, roads, and things like that. So the county created an APFO ordinance, which was adopted in 1992. And what that says is the county can only build, or developers can only build so many units per year. It limits the amount of development that can be built per year in the county. And that's why you have this drop-off here. This big spike was because people knew there was going to be an APFO at the time. But over this many years, you can see it's actually worked pretty well. It doesn't stop growth, it just paces growth. And if if you reach those number of units per year, there's a waiting list, and so you have to wait till the next year to build. So it kind of paces growth over time. It's been changed over time considerably. In the 2000 plan, it dropped the number of units to this number. And as you can see, there's kind of a drop off here. And this, you can see it in the last 10 years. This is when we had a lot of development, then the recession hit. But this last year is really interesting. This is a blow up of this. This is only through October for 2013. We don't have November, December yet, but we already have this many units if you compare it to as far as construction that's occurred in 2013. So we've had 2,000 units built so far in 2013 through October, which is the most since 2000. So that's a sign that the economy is picking back up if compared to the previous years after
And
the
Jeff,
recession.
these are units in the sense, single townhouses,
Yes.
all those maple lawn.
Exactly, yeah. So these are actually, each unit equals one house. And this is a breakdown by type. So of those 2,000 plus, you can see that there's 943 apartments, 531 townhomes, and the single family. So you can see the trend back here. Look at all the single families. If you follow the blue line, the number of single family units has decreased. In large part because we're running out of land for single family units. There's just not a lot of big parcels left. While at the same time, the number of townhomes and apartments in particular have increased. And that's going to be the continuing trend moving forward.
Is maple lawn the major contributor to this number?
Maple lawn has quite a bit, yes.
So that will continue to,
That will continue. It's probably about 80%, 70% of the way done.
okay.
Yeah, so, but that maple lawn will continue. Emerson is another development, a lot of things in Route 1 corridor. And I have some developments later on in this chart.
Jeff, was that the ceiling, or is there a particular number that's the ceiling, or is that kind of dependent on what the APFOs do?
Yeah, this is actually what's been building
What
permitted.
is the goal of APFO on average?
I have a chart coming up that shows that. Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
reading it.
right, yeah, okay, yeah. So in fact,
So is it capped
this is
around
it, this is it.
2,500?
This is APFO. This is the adopted chart by the county council. This is the general plan. This is in the general plan, and that's how many units that APFO says can be built per year. And it gets kind of complicated because we divide it up into these areas. We have a downtown pool, we have what's called a growth revitalization pool, an established communities pool, and a green neighborhood pool. That's if you develop environmentally friendly developments. And then the rural west is 100. It used to be 250, so this has dropped to 100. And I have a map that shows
Hey, Jeff,
this. Yeah.
but the permits and the allocations don't exactly line up, correct? Because some of those allocations have been deferred?
Yeah, so the reason the permits and the allocations don't line up is because the allocations, it always looks 3 years ahead. So it's basically what we approve each year, but then it takes 2-3 years for the developer to get through the approval process and build the units. Or maybe they're through the approval process, but then the market's not there, so they don't build the units. It's never a perfect lineup. And in fact, we might have a boost of units that may be higher than APFO because there's been developments waiting, churning to get their financing, that kind of thing. So really quickly, this growth revitalization area is concentrating along the Route 1 corridor, Route 40 corridor, Emerson, Maple Lawn. So it's really the things I talked about before. We want to concentrate growth. The established communities is this brown area, so there's still development potential, but not a lot. So that's why if you look at these numbers, the established communities is 400 per year, growth and revitalization is 1,200 because we want to put the units on those corridors. And then downtown Columbia has its own pool.
Question for you?
Yeah.
Green neighborhood stuff going on?
There's been one that's almost done off of Bonnie Branch. It's called, I forget the name of it. And in Oxford Square on Route 1 is going to be Green Neighborhood. So there's two
Well,
projects.
what is a green neighborhood?
Basically, there's two parts to it. One is the site work has to be green, so you have things like improved stormwater management. So instead of a stormwater management pond, you might have a rain garden on people's homes, or you might have a rain barrel, so the rain goes off the house into the barrel. So there's site work, and then the other half of it is the actual building, the construction. So you might have solar panels on the roof, you might have high efficiency appliances, things like that. So it's environmentally friendly, and it's through the LEED system, which is a certifiable green system.
And where are those requirements?
Those requirements, we have we have they're on our website.
Yeah, but where,
legally?
legally, where are they?
What do you mean, what do you mean legally, I'm sorry? Like,
In order to be qualified as a green neighborhood, what does the law say, or what do the regulations, or where are the regulations
They're-
that define that?
they're part of the subdivision regulations. And they're based on the LEED certification. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, actually, only one building, interestingly enough, only one, I've worked on Oxford Square.
Oh, okay.
Only one building has to be LEED certified. But the
Okay.
infrastructure, you're right, the site work and the infrastructure
Yeah.
includes having a green maintenance manual, homeowner outreach to how to maintain a green home.
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Construction, when they actually build, it's recyclable materials before, instead of dumping all the construction debris and things like that, right?
And there's a
Yeah.
lot of consideration of natural resources and planning to maximize the retention of natural resources on the site while developing.
Yeah, and they just changed the legislation, didn't they, recently, to make it, it was kind of stringent, and we were finding that the builders couldn't really abide by it, so
Right.
I don't have a full
So there's
understanding
some-
of it.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some minor tweaks
To it, to
yeah.
make it a little bit more flexible for builders.
So in that regards, you have 1,000 units, you can have one unit LEED certified at any level?
Well, one building, so in Oxford Square, the school is
Right.
is
Yeah.
a LEED silver, and so that meets that requirement.
But what about like all the residential, don't they have to be all LEED? Yeah.
And then there's a whole maintenance requirement
Yeah.
that has to, and then I wrote the manual,
Oh,
so it's,
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's maintaining the landscape, maintaining the trails,
Mm-hmm.
maintaining the road system, maintaining the lighting that's all in the public right of way, all has to be done in a green way.
Yeah,
Can you shoot a copy of the manual? Well, we'll learn.
yeah.
Yeah, and the requirements for green neighborhoods is online. If you search it, you can find it.
So the intent, yeah.
Just in line, I just one quick, in terms of how many they're likely to be in the future, how's the reception? I mean, are you enforcing that? How is it enforced, and are people interested in it? I mean, is that?
Well, they are. One of the ways it's incentivized because in some cases, these two plans actually, there weren't enough allocations in the other pools. So they actually took advantage of the green neighborhood pool to be able to move forward and develop.
Okay.
And it is looked at, and it is a brand new thing in the county. There's two of them.
And buyers seem to be willing to sign on for?
Yeah, I mean, their units are being built and being sold right now in that one development I know of. That's the first one. It's almost finished. Oxford Square it hasn't broke ground yet, but we'll see how that's a more of a high-density mixed-use version. Yeah. So those are the corridors I talked about. We had a comprehensive, after the general plan, we do a comprehensive rezoning, and we just did that, and it was adopted in October 6, 2013. And this is the areas of the county that were rezoned, and that yielded 1,800 units. So after the 2001 plan, we yielded an additional 9,000 units. So this comp zoning was less intense, so 1,800 units. And so the latest and greatest, including the comp zoning, are in these numbers. This is how many units exist in the county. This is what our expected build-out is, based on the current zoning. This is how many units are built under building permit, so they're being constructed now, or could be shortly. These are units that are recorded unbuilt, and these are in process plans. So these are subdivision plans that came in that our department is reviewing that don't have approval yet. Once the plans are approvable, we'll approve it, and then they'll enter these two stages. And this is what's estimated based on undeveloped land in the county, based on the current zoning that hasn't submitted a plan yet.
That target number is for what period of time?
This is 30 years.
30 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
30 or even 40 years.
So if you look at those specifics, I mean, we're on the way to...
Yeah, now a lot of these plans are phased plans. They're bigger and they're phased over 5-10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, because per APFO, they can't build them all at once.
Okay.
We force phase it actually. We basically say you can't build them all at once, you have to build so many a year. And that helps us plan for schools.
Is there a translation to population growth based on these numbers?
Yeah, so we do have population growth, and I have a chart coming up that shows that. This is by planning area. The planning areas are these areas. This is Elkridge, Columbia, Southeast. The rural west is everything outside of the planned service area line. This
Planned
line,
service area for water and sewer.
water sewer. So there's no water sewer out here. It's all well and septic. And so the growth is much less, and here's Ellicott City. So if you look at those areas, this is, in Columbia is the most units, followed by Ellicott City, and then Elk Ridge, and then the southeast and the rural west is, even though it's 60% of the land area, it has the least number of units because it's lower density, single-family detached.
What was the shaded area in your previous slide? What did that mean?
That's Route 1 corridor. So it's basically,
The one there, okay.
oh, this is water only,
Okay.
so.
No sewer but water. So
Exactly.
this is not the addition, rather it exists.
Exactly, that's always.
It's around the
existed.
landfill.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they added that back. There was two additions, one here and one down here.
Okay.
That was rezoned. Very small additions. The numbers on the top are basically kind of what's left based on the zoning.
Is
The
the G
colors.
parcel in the Columbia plan?
No. The numbers aren't in here until they get the zoning. So technically, there could be potential for more.
When does when does the development covenant flip?
I think 2017 is the covenants
Oh,
come
so
off
it's
there.
not-
Yeah.
What?
It's still gonna be a ways away though, because you have downtown Columbia building. So it's hard to see downtown Columbia plus the GE site, but it depends on the market, you know. Here's some plans in the process. This is the 6,000, 7,000 units or so. Oxford Square is 1492. The developer liked that number, he likes history. And then the overlook of Blue Stream is 9. These are all Route 1 plans, Howard Square, Morris Place. So you can see Turf Alley is a big development in the Ellicott City. And these are various parts of Turf Alley. Laurel Park Station is the TOD down at the corner, the southeast corner of the county, 1,000 units there. Annapolis Junction is going to be built, that's another TOD. So there's a lot of apartment type construction, particularly along the Route 1 corridor.
Condos are mixed in with apartment.
Yeah, condos, yeah.
Do you have a relative idea of the mix?
I think right now it's, like 70% rental in the county. All of the downtown Columbia is rental, because the condo, apparently it's very difficult to build condo with financing these days. So the first stage of the downtown Columbia that I pointed out earlier, they're all going to be rental. There's a question about the market for that. But, these are site development plans. These are further along, so once these site development plans are approved, they can get building permits. This is the downtown Columbia, so their site development plan will be approved shortly for phase 2.
Any thing about that Bennigan's? There was a project that was coming up that still is,
Bennigan's.
where Bennigan's used to be?
Yeah, well, that's moving forward. That was
Okay.
160 apartment units with some retail below it. And it was WCI Tower. WCI, it was called the WCI Tower. The company went bankrupt.
Mhm.
And there was a lawsuit preventing it.
Right.
A new owner now, so that's going to be moving forward.
So those will be apartments, not
Yeah.
condos.
Oh, I don't know what they're going to be.
150,000 square feet of office and 160 apartments.
Are they rentals or condos, do you know?
Rentals.
Rentals, okay. The issue was the height of it.
Mhm.
That's why some people oppose it.
Because-
It's going to be not as high.
8 stories.
But wider with underground parking, I think, yeah. So, this is a telling chart. This is what exists now by unit type, and then in the future, even though there's 53% of homes are single-family detached, in the future only 30% are going to be that way. This includes the rural west. If you take out the rural west, it's like 20%. So only 1 out of every 5 homes in the eastern part of the county will be single-family detached. 4 out of 5 will be townhouses and apartments. And this is the future growth by type there. Now, you mentioned population projections. This is our latest population projections. This is the 2010 census. We expect the population to grow. This is going to be updated, though. I haven't updated it yet. And I'm in discussion now with a demographer with the state.
We think the population is approximately 300,000 right now?
Right about now. The census is saying it's higher, and that's why this number might jump up. And not because of new growth, but because when the census comes out with their estimate, they're estimating about 5,000 more people in the county now than I'm estimating based on growth. And the speculation is because there's more people moving into the existing homes. Maybe perhaps as a result of the economy. People doubling up, kids moving back to their parents. So if that's the case, and that trend holds, then this population may increase.
Jeff, the ratio doesn't seem to be, the growth, population growth doesn't seem to be same ratio, at least roughly, based on the number of units that you're increasing, is it?
Well, I mean, if you just look at the units that are being built,
They were like close to 34 or 4?
yeah, part of what's happening is that the types of units, apartments and
Oh, okay,
townhouses,
okay.
don't hold a lot of people.
Got it.
So that's part of it. Part of it is we're also, with the aging of the population, the household size is decreasing. But that may be contradicted by what we're seeing, because like I said, the census comes out with estimates. Now, the census estimates may be wrong too, because it's based on births minus deaths, and it's based on domestic migration, which is tracked by IRS records, and it's based on international migration. But the international migration apparently comes from state numbers, and they're kind of allocated to the counties based on past year trends. So that might
So
be.
they're really just estimating?
They're estimating. They do the census once every 10 years, where they send out the
It's coming up
forms.
soon now.
Well, 2010, 2020.
Yeah.
It just happened, well, yeah.
I heard they're preparing for that.
Yeah, it takes a while, right. So anyways, we're going to take a look at this. If the base is increasing, the question is that trend going to last? Are people going to be, when the economy picks back up, are the household size going to decrease? Jobs, historically, we've had about 3,000 jobs a year for the last 10 years, from 2000 to 2010. So in the general plan, we projected that same rate. And we have the capacity for that. So we're projecting about 15,000 jobs every 5 years. So far, it's 2013, 2014, we're on track to achieve that, because there is enough non-residential land available. This is the non-developed acreage, so here's existing acreage, and this is what's left in the county.
How do you define a job?
Job is a person who
Part-time, full-time?
well, those are BEA numbers, so it's actually both part-time and full-time.
Go ahead, Nina had a question.
I
Yes.
just have a two-part question. Number one, is that a net increase of 15,000, given the fact that we have this population boom bust coming up, with
Mhm.
people retiring?
Yes.
Okay, and my second question is that, are those jobs only physically in Howard County, or are those Howard County workers?
These are jobs physically in Howard County.
But it could be people from the county or outside the county.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you know the latest percentage on out-migration?
Typically, it's like, they say about a third of the people work outside of the county, a third of the people go north to Baltimore area, a third of people go south, and a third kind of stay in Howard County, live and work in Howard County.
But what about the job, I'm just saying this, is that I know I've had a very hard time filling slots for jobs that, pay decently, but given housing prices in this county, it's very hard to have workers, even at a professional level, living in Howard County and taking those jobs. A lot of our employees come from Anne Arundel County and Baltimore County, and other places where, land is a little cheaper.
Right.
I'm just curious as to whether those jobs in Howard County are, jobs that are being filled by people who can afford to live here, or is it, the people at the Starbucks?
That's a very good question, and there's a lot of discussion on that issue. And the county has an affordable housing policy that they're implementing. In fact, they just expanded it to now require a fee in lieu for even single-family detached homes. So that discussion about having people live and be able to work and afford to live in Howard County is a very valid thing, and is under. But the region as a whole, people work and live everywhere.
Yeah.
So
no,
yeah, so that's
no,
yeah.
I get that, but.
Right.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
in-migration from people who live in other counties who migrate to Howard.
There are, yes,
to
yeah,
work.
yeah. I don't have a graph, but the jobs by job type in Howard County, like the jobs that are actually located in Howard County, there's a very high percentage of them that are professional services, which you'd expect with NSA and all the high-tech industry in the county.
Quick question there. The W.R. Grace building on 32, is there a plan to create a 32 corridor of office buildings, or it's just a solid building?
Actually, for W.R. Grace, there's a new zoning category called CEF, Community Enhancement Floating Zone, and they're going to try to propose to build residential units.
Oh, really?
In that land next to W.R. Grace, using the CEF, even though it's zone commercial, and those also weren't in my numbers. We have this new CEF So,
So really, there won't be any more office buildings?
not in that site, no, yeah, not in that site. So that's that, and I think the very last, this last slide, this is an interesting chart, because it shows the breakout of the percentage by land use. So about 34% of all land in the county is residential, 15% is commercial, 12% is undeveloped, so that's what's to be built. 18% is parkland and preservation easements. The county's done a very good job. About 37% of all land in the county, both east and west, is preserved either through parks, open space, environmental easements, agricultural easements. So again, the quality of life is important. We don't want to build, and develop. We also want to have parks and open space. And so that's also in the general plan. We try to have this balanced approach with the whole thing. And then the last thing, on our website, we do have, again, this general plan report, plus there's other reports and discussions on APFO and things like that if you're further interested in it.
And I'll post his presentation to the Dropbox, and
Yeah.
I'll talk
Question
about
on the
it.
previous slide. So
Yeah.
since most of the land, I guess, in the county that's still undeveloped, looks like it's in the west, does that just fall into the developed residential category, or where is all that?
Yeah, most of this, well, this includes both west and east. And most of this would be residential. In other words, most of this land will be going towards residential development. Is that your question?
And but the area that's in the rural west, is that mostly, I guess, categorized here as developed residential? Is that all?
Oh, yeah, so there's actually less undeveloped land potential in the west than you would think. Primarily because so many easements, there's so many ag pres easements and environmental pres easements. The amount of undeveloped potential isn't all that great. I think like 3,000 housing units over the next 30 years in the rural west is available. And we have some maps that show the environmental easements, if you're interested in looking at that.
Thank you, Jeff, that's very.
Okay, good morning. I'm Kent Menser, and there are two messages this morning from me. One is I work for you. You pay your taxes. That money ultimately gets to us, gets to our team. So thanks very much for that. The other message is that we don't know how big Fort Meade is going to grow. It continues to grow and grow and grow, and we'll talk about that. The organization that I'm a coordinator for lack of a better term, is called the Fort Meade Regional Growth Management Committee, and that's 8 counties and 3 cities that surround Fort Meade. You see those in kind of the light blue there. Even Queen Anne's and Talbot County are part of this organization, and our focus is to.
Got to use that
I'll
arrow.
go.
The right arrow. Right lower right-hand corner. Okay.
This is our organization, and again, the 8 counties, 3 cities. We have a couple of focus areas called initiatives: a base collaboration initiative, a family support, a strategic planning, and a base business and emergency management initiative. These are outcomes of about 7 years of work. In fact, some of the people around this table were on our committees about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, we came in when BRAC came in, Fort Meade Growth, Base Realignment and Closure. We here had the good BRAC, okay? The good BRAC is we grew. The bad BRAC is your installation goes away, so we're very, very fortunate. That BRAC brought in 5,800 new positions. So our group, which is funded by Department of Defense, about 90% by Department of Defense, our group is focused on, or was focused on, still is focused on, preparing the jurisdictions around Fort Meade for the impacts and opportunities of Fort Meade growth. Our initial concern was that this region didn't get hit by a Big Mac truck in the middle of the night. The growth hit us, didn't know what happened, that kind of a thing. It took us about 1.5 years or 2 years to get through that, to understand that this growth, for the most part, was going to be very, very positive. That said, we knew there were 2 areas that were not going to be positive. We knew with this growth, traffic would not become better. We knew with this growth, housing would not become more affordable. And those are 2 areas, and obviously those came true. Otherwise, the job growth has been very positive. Quickly, the strategic planning initiative, within that, there's a major transportation element. And we've worked very closely with this county and all the counties on areas like transportation and schools, infrastructure, and so on. In fact, Jeff was on one of our committees, worked very closely with him 7 years ago, and today we also work very closely with him to make sure that we're coordinated. And I'll talk more about coordination in just a minute. You see our advisory group, for those who can't read from back in the back, Congressman Cummings, Ruppersberger, and Sarbanes, Ken Ullman are our advisory group, along with Kate Hetherington. The two core counties that work this issue are Anne Arundel County, it's the host county for Fort Meade, and then Howard County. Any questions? Please stop me.
What is Queen Anne's has an impact because of BRAC?
They do, Queen Anne's County, because that growth has pushed across the bridge. And so they wanted to basically be up on what was taking place on Fort Meade. So they weren't surprised. The question we get is about Talbot County. Why would Talbot County be interested in this? Well, Talbot County has been innovative in their approach to this, and that is that they're looking at potential being, in the future, a telecommuting center. Picture in Talbot County, you got this quality of life on the water and so on and so forth, and picture maybe a big cement block building, that's classified, and you're a top scientist that's come out here from California, and so you ride your bicycle with your t-shirt on, your shorts, over there to the building, you swipe your card, you go inside, you connect up with whoever it might be, National Security Agency, somebody else, and you do all your work right there. So Talbot was looking at different aspects of this growth and this mission and how it could help their economy. So they're actually very, very innovative.
Yeah, pretty good idea.
All right, got to have a wiring diagram, block diagram. This is very important to us. This is what causes us to operate day in, day out. We know that jobs drives, from our perspective, jobs drives everything. And so you can see the jobs here on this side in the region, Fort Meade and their partner agencies on the installation, defense contractors, and other jobs. That drives the regional job base, drives workforce and families, that drives land use and structures, that drives public services. And that then creates what we call mission success factors. And most importantly, that drives quality of life, which drives recruiting and retention both on and off Fort Meade, and it drives of individuals and recruiting and retention of tenants on Fort Meade or businesses off Fort Meade. The point here is that, that Fort Meade and the region are in this together. The Fort Meade mission, with the kind of quality workforce that it needs, would not be doing well if the quality of life outside the fences was not good. If the schools were bad, they'd have a very difficult time recruiting for National Security Agency and Defense Information Systems Agency and others. So we're tied together. It's a message that's understood for the most part by those outside the fence. It's a message for those inside the fence that's just beginning to understand that we're tied in this together. If the mission goes away, the quality of life will go down. The quality of life goes down, the mission may go away. Because as the Department of Defense chooses installations to retain, they're looking very closely at the quality of life around the installation. Because you've got on one hand, particularly at Fort Meade, you've got an all-volunteer service men and women who choose. And then you've got civilians, the civilian workforce who can choose where they want to work. It can be here, it can be Atlanta, or it can be out in Monterey, California. So we're tied in this together. Again, easy message for us outside the fence, but not so easy for inside the fence. I show this line and block chart not because it's cool, because it shows who has an influence on Fort Meade. And that is Department of the Army, they're down in the Pentagon. They're looking at hundreds of installations, okay? Fort Meade works under what's called the Installation Management Command. That's out in San Antonio. They got 100+ installations that they're also looking at. The Central Region, which is also there in their chain of command, that's also out in San Antonio, Texas. And then you have Fort Meade. So who's watching out for Fort Meade? There'll be a message later on, but it's Fort Meade. It's Fort Meade. 116 tenants on Fort Meade. Consider Fort Meade to be a large federal or DOD office park. That's what it is. The garrison commander on Fort Meade is I wouldn't want to tell Colonel Foley this, but he's the office park manager. For those who don't know, I was a Fort Meade commander from 1990 to 1993. I'm a 20-year-plus resident of Columbia since I've left the military. Again, 116 tenants, the 3 tenants that moved in during the BRAC time frame. Defense Adjudication Agency, they're involved with security clearances. Defense Information Systems Agency, they manage basically defense communications worldwide. And defense media activity. They do things like Armed Forces, Radio and Television, Stars and Stripes, and those kind of things. They came in, 5,800 slots, or positions, or workforce positions, came into Fort Meade. A wide variety of tenants on Fort Meade. They range in size from the National Security Agency, who you don't know exactly, but let's say it's between 25 and 30,000, down to tenants with 1 or 2 people in, and then those in between. There are about 10 large tenants. It's a challenge to manage, and the challenge that Fort Meade has is, and it's been a problem probably since about 1960, and that is it's a Army installation, and the Army does not consider it to be a very important Army installation. There are not ranges there and helicopters and thousands of young soldiers and that kind of a thing. So it's kind of a tertiary installation from the Army standpoint and funding of base operations standpoint. On the other hand, it's a major installation with Department of Defense missions, NSA and DISA and so on. So there's a disconnect. So you go on to Fort Meade and you'll see $100 million buildings alongside a 15-cent road or 15-cent plumbing. It's a major problem for Fort Meade. They've been trying to resolve it, but it's a challenge.
Question.
Yes.
The adjudication agency, is this the one from Ohio? Or if you can just mention where they moved from, these 3 agencies?
Okay. Defense adjudication came from a number of independent offices across the U.S., and the predominance of them came from San Antonio, a major office in San Antonio. But they were actually a bunch of, what you're implying, I think, is that there were a bunch of regional offices they consolidated here, okay? And then they contracted out a lot of their services. What they're trying to do is, they're trying to, in an ideal world, is only have one agency in Department of Defense that would issue all security clearances. The reality of it is they've gone from 13 down to about 6, and that's probably about as far as it's going to go. For those that don't know, agencies like National Security Agency and CIA and others all have independent ways of issuing security clearances. And if you have a security clearance from one, most likely it's not good with the other. They're trying to resolve that, and that's what this move is about. DISA really came from Northern Virginia, Skyline area and other areas. And defense media actually came, most of it came from Alexandria, but some from San Antonio, for the most part, 5,800 total. Now, this is the breakout of the Fort Meade workforce. I think most of you know this already, but it's predominantly civilians. You look at civilians government service, GS on the left, and you look at contractors there, which are obviously civilians. And then you see the military. The military is unique. Even though Fort Meade's not called a joint installation, the reality of it is that it has just about an equal number of Army, Navy, and Air Force on the installation, and some Coast Guard, and a Marine battalion that's on the installation. Most of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines on Fort Meade are in some form of direct support to the National Security Agency. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I can. So
Yes.
one of the questions I have for you is projections on civilian growth, actually contractors, excuse me. So one of the, I guess, this is the domain I live in, so I work in, and one of the disturbing trends I've seen is the indirect support of the customer seems to be, a lot of that seems to focus in Northern Virginia, more so than I had expected. A lot of the new sort of the folks that don't have to be, aren't required to be in proximity to Fort Meade. There's not a direct requirement. More of that growth is going on in Northern Virginia now than I thought would be the case. And I'm curious if you're seeing that, how it affects your projections on contractor growth, or if it's just sort of
That's I'm not knowledgeable on that. Is really the bottom line is that we haven't seen that. Doesn't mean it's not happening.
Okay.
We do know that with the BRAC there was an expectation of a lot of the defense contractors that were supporting, let's say, Defense Information Systems Agency down in the Skyline area, that they would, when DISA packed up, they would pack up and move also. But what people didn't realize is that a lot of the major contractors that were supporting DISA were also at the same time supporting the National Security Agency. So you take an organization like an SAIC or so on, it wasn't like they moved up, they expanded maybe where they were, or other agencies. So it wasn't quite that big change, or that move change that took place. Now on contractors, there are, basically the model we use on contractors is, for every one person on the installation, worked on the installation, there are 2.2 contractors off the installation. All right? Here's some more numbers, okay? BRAC was 5,800, but what happened? Between 2003 and 2012, Fort Meade grew from 34,000 workforce to 55,000 workforce. You know, if this was a 55,000 workforce with Ford Motor Company or Boeing, we'd all be up on a, you know, I'd be wearing Ford in the back of my jacket right now and have a Ford cap on, and you'd know about it from talking to people in the churches and the restaurants and so on and so forth. But it's not the case here. It's a real challenge because this is really an economic dynamo of Fort Meade. A lot of people are involved with it. The problem is that for the most part, a lot of folks who work at Fort Meade can't talk about it. And so therefore it's hard to get the visibility. We project the workforce on Fort Meade, that's a projection, 66,000 by 2020. It will continue to grow. Fort Meade contributes $20 billion a year to the Maryland economy, $20 billion. Persons again have jobs because of Fort Meade mission. When you take the 55,000 and take 2.2 times that and add it back to 55,000, you get 160,000 plus jobs that are in this area. It's the largest employer of Howard County residents. It's over 12,500 Howard County residents work on Fort Meade. The largest, not the largest employer in Howard County, but it is a, there's agencies that are on Fort Meade that have locations in Howard County. Now you wouldn't know that. All you have to do is, you see a black fence, white TV cameras, and no signs. Wonder who that is. All right. And we have an outfit called the Base Business Initiative. We work with companies to help them with defense contracting and other kinds of contracting. We have 2,800 companies that are part of that organization. Yes?
Do you have any idea what is the percentage of that 20 billion that really is an impact on Howard County?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was mulling on it when I was back sitting down over there. It'd be an estimate on my part. And I would say around, we had that figure at one time. And it popped out. A senior person at Fort Meade popped that figure out, and they tried to pull it back in, but we got it. And if I were going to guess, and again, don't bet your mortgage on this one, maybe around a little over $2 billion, maybe over $2 billion.
About 10% is a direct impact, direct and indirect impact on Howard County.
Yes, probably
We
more.
need to increase that.
Probably more than that.
Yeah.
But it's a major.
Let's start at 50% and I will increase that.
It's a
One
major.
question over here.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
You may get to this, but just running sort of back of the envelope numbers, it looks like about 25% of the workforce lives in Howard County, 25%. And so as you project the growth forward, you're projecting about 11,000 more 2020. Can we assume the percentage is going to be about the same?
That'd be a reasonable assumption. Of course, what takes place is that this growth is inside Jeff's figures. So it's not like what he projects and then we add that on. These are people who are filling in. And that's what they've done here in the past. I think people had expectations with BRAC and other growth that they were going to see, well, in fact, there's a term that used, which we hated. You heard the term tsunami related to BRAC. Look at it as a tide coming in, basically, okay? Again, our numbers are inside Jeff's numbers, inside his projections. We're just a source of those people.
You made the point that much of the growth over the past 10 years didn't come from BRAC.
That's correct. If there had been no BRAC, we had a growth of about 20,000 over the past 10 years. BRAC was 5,800 of that. BRAC had all the visibility. It was a movie star. But the fact of the matter, if there had been no BRAC, there's still been all this growth associated with the Fort Meade mission, cyber protection, defense and offense, and so on and so forth.
I take your point that your numbers are inside his, but it's still reasonable to say maybe 25, 26, 2,700
Yes.
new jobs and new employees living in Howard County.
Yes.
I think it's one of the reasons why housing prices are so high in Howard County. We have artificially constrained the demand for housing in Howard County. Now, maybe that's a good thing, but one of the results has been an increase in housing prices.
Yeah.
Ken?
Just some anecdotal, but when we first talked about how many would move in, it really didn't matter because somebody would buy that house. In the last round of redistricting, we had more military families testify than I've ever seen show up. Wow. Total.
And it's all about what? Schools.
Yeah.
Military families, particularly the level of military families that are coming in here. First and foremost, because I went through that myself, 27 years in the military, the first thing we did was look at school systems and make any kind of sacrifice on the housing side to get kids in the right school system. And it's funny how it's having an effect, because there are a lot of people who would like to live on Fort Meade. There are 2,300 housing units on Fort Meade. They'd like to live on Fort Meade. That's in the Anne Arundel County school system. And there are people, rightfully or wrongfully, not even making a criticism or a judgment, but are saying, no, we want to live on Fort Meade, we're not going to live on Fort Meade, we want to try to live in Howard County. And then we have people that come to us that are more going to Carroll County, because they've tried it in Howard County with the houses and so on, just seeing that they just can't work it out, so they're going to Carroll County. They're going farther out. But again, the driving factor for these military families is quality of schools, like many others. All right. Historically, Fort Meade was started in 1917, and it's always been an ad hoc planning relationship between the counties around Fort Meade and the installation itself. And this has really cost the taxpayers millions of dollars because of the planning, quality of the planning practices. It's been like we've been reactive, and so is Fort Meade reactive. We're just kind of doing our thing here and doing our thing here, then a problem comes up, we try to solve that problem. By the time it becomes a problem, it's an expensive problem, typically. We can't do that any longer. Fort Meade is too large, it's a billion-dollar organization, and we around Fort Meade are also billion-dollar organizations. So this has been a problem in the past, a bridge based upon personalities and politics. If you had a Fort Meade commander who was very community friendly, that is involved the community, maybe what I call the cocktail circuit level. But we had to have that staff relationship. And that's what we're building towards, a staff relationship. Solid bridge, you can see that. Based upon strategic planning. We're working with Fort Meade right now. Actually, we have regional goals and objectives in the Fort Meade strategic plan right now. We're not where we want to be. You know, strategic planning is always a challenge, whether it's in-house, out-house, or whatever. But this is what we want to do. And the outcomes of that, on and off the installation. We want to share resources. In fact, we've got a great example. It's known across the nation. Howard County is famous for this, and that is recycled water. And that is that Howard County was sending about 18 million gallons a day of recycled water in a pipe coming out of the plant in Anne Arundel County, and just below the Fort Meade water plant, that water was going into the Patuxent River. It was going into the bay. Good water going into the river. So Fort Meade is growing, about $4 billion worth of construction we're looking at in the next 10 to 15 years at Fort Meade on the big cyber campus. They're going to need cooling water. So we got with Fort Meade and said, can you use recycled water? And they said yes, and to the tune of about 5 million gallons a day plus. And as we speak, they're building a pump house over on the Patuxent River. They'll pump that water coming out of that pipe over into the Fort Meade proper and be used for cooling towers and other kinds of things. And
I can tell you a
yeah,
little
talk
bit
about
about
the
it.
financial
It's a
part.
$40 million project which the federal government is paying for. So the federal government will pay for all the facilities to build the pipe to Fort Meade, the pumping station, the infrastructure on Fort Meade, and then they are going to buy the water from us at a pretty good price. It's somewhere, I don't remember the exact price per gallon. It's somewhere in the vicinity of, I think, 80 cents a gallon. If they hadn't done this, their alternative would be to buy potable water from Baltimore City.
Or drill 2 new wells in the aquifer underneath Fort Meade.
Which
So the
probably
other
wasn't
alternative.
likely,
Yeah.
at a cost of 2 or 3 times that amount for water. So, you know, the water still ends up in the river eventually, but it's going through Fort Meade.
Well,
and
80%
at least they're paying us for that, and they are building all the infrastructure. So this is not costing Howard County taxpayers any additional dollars. That was our big concern.
and you've got some revenue off that.
We're generating some revenue.
So our water bill's going down? No.
They won't go up as fast.
Well, it's a great project. It's, you know, I always hate to say win-win because I always kind of like you to talk about that kind of thing. But this one is, for Fort Meade, it's a great thing for them. They're saving money on the cost of water. They're going to have to try to drill 2 more wells in the aquifer. And I'm for it.
They weren't going to be able to do that according to what
Yeah.
Maryland Department of the Environment was saying.
And 80% of the water, I understand, that's going to go over there will be evaporate. And what's left then will be recycled back through the Fort Meade recycling plant to be cleaned up and back in the river again. So it's been good. And what I do over there is I walk around trying to find people who want recycled water. We're trying to find more organizations on Fort Meade now in the future to use recycled water. We've still got 13 million gallons a day left. So if you know anybody who wants recycled water, let us know, and we'll get back with them.
Ken, the water, the 20% water will be cleaner than what it would have been otherwise sent directly into the Chesapeake Bay? Is that a good?
No, the water, basically, simply put, I think the water quality will be the same that we were putting into the river.
Okay.
It's just now going to send that water through. 80% is lost in evaporation, 20%. And that 20% is going to be pretty dense water. So that's going to go back in a recycling plant, cleaned up, and then go back in the river at the same, basically
The
the same
water we
quality.
put in the river is cleaner than the river when it goes through.
That's true.
All right, I want to talk about the constituency because I think this is critical. And actually, you're the first people that are hearing this part of this briefing. Constituency is extremely important. What are we talking about here? Well, we got Fort Meade constituency, we got Fort Meade region, and I'm going to talk about Fort Gordon. Fort Meade, and people on Fort Meade, if you start with the residents on Fort Meade, they're transient. They come in for 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, and they leave. So if you're on Fort Meade and you live in a house there and there's a fence behind it, and National Security Agency decides to build a 100-story building behind it, it's like, okay. Unlike Howard County, okay, but they move a tree, which is good, okay? So what I'm saying is that the people who live on Fort Meade don't have strong roots with Fort Meade or a strong interest in the future of Fort Meade. Not a criticism, just a fact, okay? The commander's in there for 2 to 3 years. He or she is focused on the mission and base ops, and then they're gone, okay? And then you have the staff, the civilian staff that might be over there for 3 to 10 years, and they all live, 90% of the Fort Meade workforce, over 90% lives outside of Fort Meade, okay? So that's one set of constituents. Now, they're not that interested in the future of Fort Meade, other than the mission standpoint. The mission standpoint. Then you have the Fort Meade region, that's us, okay? And this should be actually 8 counties and 3 cities. But there's us, local governments, business, congressional delegation. The real powerful or influential constituents on the future of Fort Meade is really us. We're the ones that can affect the future of Fort Meade. I showed you that chart. How much do you think the people in San Antonio care about Howard County and Anne Arundel County? Not very much. They're mission focused, save money, et cetera, okay? People on Fort Meade, how much do they care? Well, they say they care, but how much do they influence and so on? Very little. Who does? You think the Pentagon cares about, the counties around Fort Meade? They do somewhat, but not much. It's up to us. And we're not strong in this area. We're not as strong as we need to be to protect the future of Fort Meade. We need to be much more active in this area, and I just want to make that message. And I'll give you an example. Army Cyber Command. On Fort Meade, you have Defense Cyber Command, 4-star general, all defense cyber. They're on Fort Meade. It's great. Navy Cyber is on Fort Meade. Marine Corps Cyber is going to be on Fort Meade. They're actually studying in Howard County right now. Air Force Cyber is down in San Antonio. They got elements up here. But the big deal was going to be on Army Cyber coming to Fort Meade. And a big competition was between Fort Gordon, Georgia, and Fort Meade. And what took place after about 4 years of going around and around, they decided for whatever kind of reasons, probably multiple reasons, to go to Fort Gordon, Georgia. And that was 1,500 slots plus 4,000 plus contractors, which is 5,500 plus jobs. That's kind of a big deal. And was there any kind of publicity on that in this area and so on? Very little or none. Now, we've had it very, very good. Fort Meade continues to grow. Life is good. But in our view, the people here need to watch out for the future of Fort Meade. This is where the action is. If you're expecting them, or expecting people in Georgia and the Pentagon to watch out for the future interests of Fort Meade and the region around it, you're wrong. It's us. So we've got to become, we believe, more active in this area and more knowledgeable in this area. Otherwise, things will just happen. And it could be, all this growth and a $4 billion cyber campus, but it could be 15 years from now. You have a 30-year plan. 15 years from now, there could be a big change in technology, and all of a sudden, maybe this cyber campus becomes outdated all of a sudden. Maybe they need to be closer to the North Pole, they need to be closer to San Antonio, or closer to Monterey, or that kind of thing. We don't know exactly. So there has to be an active constituency here, and more to come on this. I think this is a weakness we have right now. Life is good right now. We can't make that assumption that 30 years from now and 40 years from now, there'll be 55,000 jobs over there, or 60,000 jobs. Something could turn. And I can tell you that Senator Chambliss down in Fort Gordon, if you go back and read the December papers, it's like, whoa, cool. We've changed the whole world. And they were bragging about the quality of life. How great the quality of life is, and that's one of the reasons Army Cyber came. So we just can't sit back. Yes?
That decision was made in December?
Yes. On December the 19th. That's all I have. I know.
Okay, well, a couple of questions. Number
Sure.
one, NSA has been much more controversial, become much more controversial over the past year, as an understatement.
Yeah,
Is that going to affect, do you think, the future growth of NSA at Fort Meade? And the other part of this question is you've talked about the fact that they're building right now the equivalent of another Pentagon at Fort Meade in terms of space. And given that, how much of this can be really absorbed by the residents of Howard County, given the APFO kind of requirements that we have in place?
Well, I think...
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, again, I think this is a workforce that's going to be assimilated just like any other kind of workforce would be inside of Jeff's numbers. What may happen is, well, it actually probably has happened, is that there used to be the concentration of Fort Meade employees used to be in Glen Burnie in that area, starting back when NSA came in 30-some years ago. Now we're seeing more of that workforce matriculate out the I-70 corridor kind of a thing. But
Well, yeah, and when we did that study, I guess 7 years ago now, it's, Howard County is relatively small in terms of the regional population. Anne Arundel County is twice as many populated people. Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, even that's kind of far out. So the amount of absorption in Howard County relative to the other ones is, it'll be an impact.
Clarence,
There's huge capacity in the other counties.
Clarence,
and look at Odenton around Fort Meade, the growth around Odenton. Yes.
So I guess the question would be regarding quality of life. So, we have the APFO that's limiting growth here, but I think one thing that you didn't touch on, and I've heard talks from Dean Friedberg, who mentions the regional transportation system and network here in place to support that. Is the infrastructure in place, and does that affect, the quality of life of folks who may be attracted here? Is that one of the reasons why they went to Fort Ford? And and I haven't heard that the state has really stepped up to meet the regional transportation infrastructure needs to kind of support BRAC and the influx of folks that have come here. Now, is that something that you've seen as the case also, or does that fall back on us when we do long-term planning of how we might need to support the roads here and transportation infrastructure that leads to Fort Meade?
Without a doubt, we've got to work together, and we are working together on the roads to support the BRAC growth at Fort Meade. We did the numbers, and we needed about $1.3 billion, then about a 5-mile radius to bring the roads up to match up the level of growth requirements. We got about $500,000, okay, from the government, 500. Now, when our delegation went back, to Congress and others and said, you brought all this on. So what do you think they heard, though? And what they heard from is, whoa, wait, you guys got jobs. You got thousands of jobs. We've got people across the U.S. that have been involved with BRACs who've lost their whole installations, and lost jobs. So really the straight answer was, don't really come to us about now you want money. We gave you the jobs, okay? You got to work that basically out on your own as part of overall regional growth. On the growth side, I think simply put, the pain level for most people who work on Fort Meade has not reached that level yet that would cause them to use mass transit. We believe the ultimate solution is demand-driven privatized transit, and that is wherever there's a node of 44 people, whether it be in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, or Clarksville, they show up at 6:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, they get on the bus goes straight to Fort Meade, maybe in the future on a bus lane down 32, goes through the bus gate and pulls right up in front of their building, okay? But the pain level to cause people to get out of their cars has not reached that level yet. So what we're doing is we're trying to do all the planning in preparation for that. So when that day does come, it won't be a surprise. The initial preparation has taken place and so on, but right now, we're not Northern Virginia.
And you
Hopefully
foresee
it'll be
that
Northern
data
Virginia.
to come at some point?
Pardon me?
32 has gotten significantly worse.
It's going to come. Maybe 10 years from now, there'll be a bustling on 32. And when people see the buses go by at 50 miles an hour, and they're going 5 miles an hour, then that's what transmits that message that you can do better. But right now, we're not there.
So there's 60,000 people approximately a day going on to Fort Meade.
Yeah.
10 years from now, how many people do you think will be going on to Fort Meade?
Probably another 10, 15,000. And Fort Meade has taken the hit on terms of Route 32. The Parkway's gotten crazy. But 32, the Parkway, and other roads, but it's just not Fort Meade. It's a lot of drive-through now is taking place because of the growth of western Anne Arundel County and because of just overall growth. But Fort Meade is a place to focus on. Yes, sir.
The question I have is related to the $20 billion. Where is the rest of the 90%? Which counties are benefiting from?
Well, Anne Arundel, the counties that I've had on my list there, the 8 counties, but it goes out all across
So
Maryland.
major is Anne Arundel?
Anne Arundel, Montgomery, Baltimore County, Carroll
Okay.
are probably the
But I
major.
would say Anne Arundel's probably the largest.
It is the largest.
Because
Yeah, it
it's
is the largest. Yeah, largest.
And it also has the largest growth potential.
beneficiary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, we're lucky that West Anne Arundel County, it kind of had stayed stable for years and years and years, and so that land and access was available in part, yes.
I had a question. You had mentioned about the infrastructure on Fort Meade
Yes.
being in such poor condition. Who is responsible for that and the operation and maintenance of it? Is it Corps of Engineers, or is
No.
it the post, or is it?
It's the installation itself. It's the garrison has direct responsibility. And like most things on Fort Meade, this day and age, it's contracted out. So there's a base operations contractor that has the contract to maintain the installation. And of course, that contractor maintains the installation at the rate it's being funded. But housing is also contracted out on Fort Meade, a contractor. Most things on Fort Meade this day and age are contracted out. There's very few people.
Are
Yes.
you working with the planning and zoning in Anne Arundel County, Howard County, and having them talk to each other to make sure?
Yes.
Because all that development's having a 100 in Anne Arundel County and 170 to take care of this stuff here, plus all the stuff that we're doing on east of 95 is going to make that a pretty interesting place to
Yeah,
drive around.
I think that's happening more than it has in the past, in large part because of the regional, what do you call that, the regional?
Fort Meade Regional Growth Management
Growth
Committee.
Management Committee.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to bring the kind of, particularly for transportation, that transportation.
So it's also worth noting that the way that Fort Meade is actually, the actual mechanics of how they're doing the build out, and that's been quite a bit of time on that campus, is they're actually shutting down like parking lots all at one shot so they can demo it and build a building. So you could actually have a situation where like on Friday, it's reasonable to get there and you can find a parking spot, and on Monday, the dynamics completely change, and there's literally, like, I've literally tried to go there at 9:30 meeting or something, and it's like, you have to park. You can't, there isn't a place on the installation, you gotta like, go back to the National Business Park and park at the restaurant and try to find, it's completely ridiculous. And it's gonna get, it's gonna be quantum changes, because it's not gonna come like, another guy moves in today and another guy moves in tomorrow, when they blow away a parking lot and they don't replace it. There's gonna be some significant.
There's plenty of parking, just not in the right places.
The other thing I would, exactly, yeah. And the other thing I would mention is that, for this county, the observable I have is that, the Cyber Command in particular has a lot of folks who are, Security Plus certified, again, more technician types, and their income level is what it is. You also have this contractor base, think of SAIC, for instance, where you have guys who are PhD level doing fundamental research, inventing new technology, inventing new product. There's still a natural advantage that the region and the county has because of the proximity to Fort Meade, but it's not, if they can find the exact right talent in Northern California, they'll find a way, because the talent's the bigger issue for that group of folks. The other thing is those people are much more drawn to Howard County than they are elsewhere. One of the reasons I put my business in Howard County is because those are the types of people I hire, and they're very interested in living here. As we've talked about Kent many times, my younger people live in Frederick, and they commute in. because they can buy a house and, live in. But the folks who are really at the elite level, they live here, they want to live here, they work here. And that's, I think that for the county's perspective, there's a lot of upside in having jobs like that, because the income level is so high, and obviously they pay more taxes.
Yeah, my presentation is somewhat critical about things we need to do, but the fact of the matter, if you take a step back and look at our region, and look at this economic generator, and you look around the United States right now, we are very, very fortunate to be in this situation.
Nina?
I just wanted to ask a follow-up to Ryan's question. Do we have any idea about what the demographics are of the contractor population? I know one of the things that I've heard a lot, like my husband is a PhD nerd who does defense contracting. He has a really hard time finding a job around here. He works in Northern Virginia because the amount of salary that it requires to, live in Howard County, many more of those jobs seem to be in that region rather than here. He's been saying that salaries in this area for those contractors are a little lower, and a lot of I can think of maybe 10 PhDs in Howard County that I know that are commuting every day. I'm just wondering, is Fort Meade attracting, and are we then siphoning off into Howard County, people at what income level, or, is there a lot of people that are coming in, and is this growth really driven by people who can't currently afford to live in Howard County?
Well, we're filling a couple of roles in Howard County, and one is we've historically always been this great bedroom community for both Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, regardless of what happens at Fort Meade. And this is probably not answering your question directly, but I think the way the Fort Meade growth, this growth of 21,000 over the past 10 plus years, is probably driving more highly qualified people in this area who are actually working in this area, like I said, with contractors and on Fort Meade. When one tries to compare Howard County or this region with North Virginia, it's a very difficult comparison, because Northern Virginia is also kind of a one-of-a-kind or one of a three-of-a-kind places, and so I couldn't really say much about the dynamics and relationship. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, thank you again. I guess the real question is I think you can see we have in place the procedures to limit growth and to measure growth. We have a growth generator along with other growth generators. What we're going to do next week is we're going to have presentations on the infrastructure needs of the county, both from the Department of Education, for Public Works, Stormwater, the Community College. The following week, if we can get the contract settled, Richard is going to talk about his projections for personal income, what kind of personal income is taking place in Howard County, sort of follow your question. And also, I think Camille and I are going to talk about some of the long-range expenditure challenges that are facing the county. Once again, I'm putting all of the documents that were here on the Dropbox. And if you haven't accessed the Dropbox, go to www.dropbox.com. If you already have an account, you should see a link to the Spending Affordability Committee. If you don't, create one. It's a free app and it's a free thing. And then you'll have access to everything that I've put on the Dropbox, all of the presentations, all of the videos and documents too. So if you miss a meeting and you want to
somehow I have a Dropbox account, but I did not find the link.
I will check and resend you the link. Okay. And again, I'll see you again next week, hopefully, and we'll talk about our infrastructure needs and requirements.
I have business cards back there, and if anyone wants to take a tour of Fort Meade, you or your staff, I do that on a regular basis, so let me know, and I'll be glad to do that. We also have offices on Fort Meade, our group.